Today we're doing bread baking, artisanal bread baking. Le pain de campagne, le pain au levain. It doesn't matter. The universal bread, which is I love so much, because I do eat bread every day. I eat a slice of bread every day, and I think the bread should be the center of the meal. The bread for me can be a meal by itself, and I love making it. I love eating it. So I'm going to share with you a newer version than the one I did years ago, and I shared with you on YouTube channel like 3 years ago, I believe. This one is updated and it's a better version because I learned so much. We keep learning. We all learn from other people. In this version, I'm using mostly bread flour. I'm using something like 70% of bread flour and 30% of spelt flour. You can use wheat flour, you can use anything. So I will ask you to go through the recipe, do not change anything until you're happy with it, then start playing with it. What you can do, change the flour kind, and you can also change the hydration. And when we say hydration, meaning how much water you put relatively to the amount of the flour. Here we're going to have a hydration of 75%, and I'm going to show you how to make this fabulous bread, and it's crispy. Beautiful, absolutely beautiful. We're starting what we call autolyze, meaning we're going to mix the flours. I have two kinds of flours here, and the water at room temperature. First of all, we mix the two flours so the mixing is easier. Then make sure you mix very well until there is no dry ingredient visible. We don't need to knead or anything like that. All we need, just make sure there is no dry ingredient, and we stop. At this moment, we're going to cover our bowl with a lid and leave it at room temperature. It's better to clean up the bowl and has a little bit of water so it doesn't stick. And we leave it at room temperature for 3 hours. What I normally do, after 3 hours at room temperature, I put it in the fridge because I do this in the evening until the next day. But after 3 hours at room temperature, while I'm feeding the starter for the next day. If you store the autolyze in the fridge, get it out, leave it at room temperature for between 2 to 3 hours to get the dough to the room temperature. Look at the transformation of the dough. It's flexible, it is very easy to handle, and we never need it. We did not touch it before, just the thyme. So the thyme is your biggest ingredient. So here we're going to add the starter. So we already fed the starter. We know how to do it. There is a link to the video how to feed your starter, and it's triple in volume. You already weigh it, so you pour it. It is pourable because it's 100% hydration. And then using a spatula, you stretch it over the dough and you just fold it. I'm not going to knead it, I'm not going to punch it or do anything. So I'm just going to fold the dough over the starter and cover it with the lid and wait for 5 to 15 minutes. After 15 minutes, up to 30 minutes, fold the dough again, and this time we're going to add the salt. The bulk fermentation, we did not start it yet. So right now we're just preparing the dough to add the salt. You know by now that in baking and pastry we use digital scale to weigh all ingredients. Of course we weigh our salt, we add it on the dough. Then here I'm going to wet my finger and push the salt inside the dough. That was not a good idea. I think it's just better to fold the dough over the salt, and that would be enough. So we just fold the dough over itself and let it sit for a few minutes. Now we're ready for our first fold. So after the dough has been rested for a few minutes, I am going to take a little bit of dough and put it in a tall, skinny jar just to watch the progress of the volume of the dough, because when we stretch it and folding, we don't see there is any progress, even though there is progress, but it's so little. So right now for our first stretch and fold, I'm using this giant ceramic platter, and always make sure my hand are wet. This platter is wet so the dough doesn't stick. And also I'm not aggressive with the dough, because it's very, very important to be gentle with the dough. So I am going to stretch it gently and make sure to get some kind of a rectangle. And once a while, I am using the water on my finger. Of course, I'm adding a little bit of hydration. I'm increasing the hydration of the dough, but that's okay. If we get more than 70%, as long as we don't get more than 75, we should be good. So like I said, we keep stretching the dough into a rectangle as thin as possible. And if the dough is fighting with you, walk away for a few minutes and come back. Do not be aggressive with the dough. It's very, very important. And then we're going to fold it. Gently. After folding it, we're going to place the dough in a container. And I like to use the glass container because once the dough is stored in it, I can see what's going on. And the container has a lid. And we want to make sure that the container here, it's wet, it's clean, so the dough does not stick on it. So we're going to leave the dough at room temperature between half an hour to 1 hour. And we're going to have our second stretch and fold. So using the technique you're looking at now, you're actually stretching it because of the weight of the dough, and you're flipping it and you're folding it again. Once you're done with that, you place it in the same container with the lid. You wait for a good 30 minutes up to half an hour, 30 minutes to 1 hour. Make sure your spatula is wet, your fingers are wet, so the dough does not stick, because it's kind of frustrating when the dough starts sticking in your hand. You can keep your hand clean that way actually. So you stretch again, you fold, you wait between 30 minutes and an hour at room temperature. I'm showing you here that the container is clean. I wash it actually. Then I place the dough and I put the lid on it and I repeat. And I would stretch and fold 4 times, and sometimes 3 times they're enough, but a lot of time I go to the fourth one. Most of people, they just do 3. I go to 4 stretches and fold because then that way the gluten is well developed. After the fourth fold and stretch, now we're ready to shape the dough and put it in a kind of a container or a proofing baskets and leave it in the fridge for overnight. And by the way, you could always schedule your time in a manner where between the stretches and folding, you can take a break even for 2 hours by just storing the dough in the fridge during the folding and stretching, so it does not get proof and the volume does not increase dramatically, because we don't want that to happen until the real proofing starts. So now I am taking my ceramic platter. You use just your kitchen table, and for the first time we're going to use a lot of flour. I'm not going to make my finger wet or the dough. We're done with that. The flours, we're using a lot of it, so the dough does not stick to the table, does not stick to your finger. But keep in mind, by adding this flour, it does not get inside the loaf of bread. So we're good. We're not needing the flour stays outside. So use as much as you can so the dough does not stick to your fingers. So after shaping the loaf, make sure you dust a lot of flour into the proofing basket and place the dough uh, into the basket. You flip it so you have the flat side on the bottom, because we're going to flip this loaf of bread in the oven again. And then you cover it with a plastic bag or any liner you have, and then you place it in the fridge overnight. This is my newest vessel to bake the bread. You can see that I went through so many different pots to make to bake the bread. The first one was a plain cast iron. Then I went to ceramic pot because it was lighter. The cast iron absolutely amazing, but the ceramic is lighter. Then later we have the ceramic one, which has the flat base. And then I went back to the cast iron, and now I am back to this guy. It's made in England, and it's made from this black or blue carbon steel. So light, extremely light. So I'm very happy. The only problem with it, I don't have the handles. But this is the best pot to bake bread as of today, and I'm very happy with it. So that's one of the reasons I would like to make. I made this video. So if you have anything like this is perfect. Of course, if you don't have none of it, you just put it on a stone pizza and put some water in your oven in another container, and you should be fine. But I will recommend this one if you're able to find it and you're able to buy it. And when I bake, this one still has some flour in it. When I bake, I use this basket. It's quite small, so it's only like 9 or 10 inches. To help the baking process, we slash the dough. I'm using a regular razor, and also I'm going to decorate the dough with some stencils. I use the timer all the time to time the proofing, to time the baking. By now the oven was on at 500 degrees for at least 1 hour with the pot inside of it. If you don't have a pot where you're going to bake your dough, a pizza stone is good enough. So we're going to flip the dough over a liner. I'm using a reusable silicone liner. Remove the dough from the basket. We're using a parchment paper or a silicone liner. You must be very gentle with the dough so you don't lose the volume. The oven is already preheated for a good 1 hour at 500 degrees. 1 hour. We need that much heat. Using a razor, you slice your dough any way you want, and you take the pot was sitting in the oven, you place the dough on it, and then you put the lid, and we place the the bread pots back in the oven. The oven is already at 500 degrees. We're going to lower the temperature to 475, and then 5 to 10 minutes before the dough is ready, is completely baked, you remove it from the oven. Then you continue baking until it's dark mahogany. It's very important to bake the bread completely, because if not, the inside it will be a little bit too much dough. If you have a second loaf, you keep doing the same thing, but please make sure your oven it's back to 500 degrees. Your pot is still super hot. Here I'm using a stencil and adding some chocolate powder just to put a nice design. And then I'll place you slice the dough so it can expand correctly. You place it on the pot, and you're going to put it back in the oven. And once it's baked, you get it out. When the loaf of the bread is baked, you absolutely don't want to eat it immediately. There is a myth you have to eat the bread hot. No, you don't have to. It's not safe, it's not digestive. So you want to place your loaf of bread on a cooling rack and wait until it's 210 or less, 210 Fahrenheit. Now you're good to go. You can eat it. You can start slicing it. But before that, I'm sorry, until the temperature is under 105, not 200. Normally the dough is baked up to 200 degrees, 210, but you want to wait until it's 100 or 105. Then you slice your bread and look at that beautiful crumb. It's amazing. That's a very successful, beautiful piece of loaf of bread. This is a beauty. I'm very happy with the results. Do you remember that piece of dough we remove from the large piece of the dough, and I put it in a jar? It's because to make a point, once you start folding, stretching, you feel like your loaf of the dough is not rising. So that piece of dough, it's an indication that your dough is rising and is going to be fine. Here I'm just showing another method of folding in a container. This container is rectangle, and I split the dough in two halves. I put the salt during the autolyse on the top of them in case if I forget the salt. Sometimes I do actually. And make sure you put the salt inside the dough correctly so you don't have a lump of salt, and you do the stretching and folding in these nice container. I like them because they have a lid, they are flat, and they are very convenient. Let's eat the bread. So good. You see, it's so beautiful. So I hope you like this video, and I hope to see you soon. You know what to do: like it, share it, leave a comment, check the website where I leave the whole post, and I can adjust and fix if I left any steps. So I hope to see you soon. Beautiful, absolutely beautiful. And there is one thing, you can make as much bread as you want. I make like 3-4 loaves of bread, then I slice them and freeze them. They freeze very well. Please remember one thing. The moment the bread comes out of the oven, you have to let it sit. The moment it gets at room temperature, you eat it right away or you freeze it. There is no bread box or bread storing. I don't know who came up with that idea. The bread does not do well to sit in the room temperature on the refrigerator. Do not use the microwave to warm up your bread. Please don't do that. Freeze it. When you're ready to eat it, get it out of the freezer. Let it sit for an hour and eat it. If you want it warm, just put it in the oven and toast it, and it's fine. I hope you like this recipe as much as I did.